Joining us now, senior editor for the Federalist, Fox News contributor, Mollie Hemingway, and national spokesperson for the Congress on Racial Equality and conservative commentator, Niger Innis. Thank you both for being here. Let's start with the extraordinary tax cuts that it now appears that they have a chance of happening, Mollie.
Yeah, it seemed like for a long time people have been optimistic, but you couldn't quite see how they were going to get there. And now you're starting to see people are falling in line. Even Susan Collins is showing openness to voting for it. And if she is, that does mean that it's probably got a good hope of passing. The House is very open to whatever the Senate passes. It looks like something good could happen. Although in this town, in Washington, D.C., you never want to predict victory until you actually see it pass.
Yeah, or try to comprehend even at the remotest what the heck they're up to, particularly in the Senate, where Corker, Senator Tillis, Senator Heller, Kennedy, Grassley, these are question marks that we have about who is going to make this thing happen. Who do you think is going to be here? You think McConnell is fully behind this?
Yeah, I think most of those voices are going to come around. Some of those people are reticent because of the trigger, this idea that if the economy doesn't grow from the tax reform, that you would see tax hikes, which is actually not the worst idea in the world. But it seems like most people are going to be able to debate this. They're going to have 20 hours of debate on the Senate floor. If people want to make amendments, they can. Everybody's in a mood to negotiate. It's actually almost like a return to the old Senate order that has been long gone.
Well, the old Senate order, Niger, also includes Mitch McConnell and his intervention in the Senate race in Alabama. Roy Moore, the latest poll showing him picking up more support, bouncing back from what looked like a dead heat. He's now moving up, at least in the most recent poll. Your thought about his chances and prospects?
I think he has a very good chance of pulling this thing out. I think Roy Moore should get on knee tonight and thank God for people like John Conyers, Al Franken, Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, because all of a sudden, the good people of Alabama could very well say, you know what, all these guys in power get involved in this mischief. It's not to excuse it, but it makes the whole picture around Moore and the whole controversy around Moore very, very blurry. And I think Moore is going to pull this thing out in spite of this write-in candidacy of this former Marine, who I think is being put up by the swamp to undermine Moore. Did
you say by Mitch McConnell?
I said the swamp. You could say also known as.
What do you think, Mollie?
It's interesting. Mitch McConnell was the one who meddled in that primary, picking Luther Strange, thinking that would be an easy way to defeat Roy Moore. Everything has backfired for him. But yeah, I do think that it looks like there are just so many Republicans in Alabama. They have reason to believe that whatever the situation with Roy Moore, doesn't, for them, make sense to vote for someone who opposes all of their political goals. And maybe even the timing of the original Washington Post piece being like a month prior to the election gave people time to process it and react less emotionally and think more strategically about who they want to represent them in the Senate.
And Mitch McConnell's very early reaction to that piece, it looked orchestrated as it could.
Well, it actually, he probably hurt. If he really wanted to keep Moore out, he should have been more cautious in response to that story. By jumping on it immediately, I think it made people think that everything was maybe more political than it was, and it didn't really serve his interests very well.
I agree. I'm sorry, Niger, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I agree with Mollie, and it wasn't just McConnell, of course. It was about a half a dozen Republican senators that also called for him to step down. And that doesn't really help when you've got an angry public that is furious at the swamp, and you've got a bunch of folk within the Republican establishment saying that he ought to step down and ignore the will of the people.
And looking like, some would say, fools, because they're ignoring what has been the Democratic tradition, which is relying on the ethics committee, which becomes nothing more than a dark hole where ethics investigations go to die and consequences seem to disappear, like in the case of Charlie Rangel. And when once the Democrats were being focused in this sexual harassment wave that's hit us, it became pretty clear that they only wanted accountability for Republicans whose seat they envied.
Well, it would be nice if both Republicans and Democrats thought about holding people more accountable.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to Congressman Ron DeSantis, who's made it possible for them to vote that.